And hi, everybody. I'm Marty Solomon, and I work with the Western Washington Food Systems um, group. And along with Emily Mankey, we help host these lunch and learn sessions. So we're glad you're here today to learn about the San Juan Islands Food System Plan. And we have a whole team here to present to you today. I also, just before we turn it over to them, I do want to say that we are doing this in a webinar format for the first time, and we're going to try out the Q&A function on the bottom of your screen. You should see Q&A. This is a place to put your questions. We'll try and get to as many of them as possible before we end at 1 o'clock. And if there are additional questions that we haven't gotten to, we'll include them in a Q&A document. You can get the recording of this day and the Q&A document and slides on the Western Washington Food System Partnership website. I can, so if I put it in the chat, I think others will be able to see it. Is that right or no? Yeah? Okay, I'm gonna try and do that. And maybe not. I guess I'll put it in the Q&A part. So put your questions in the Q&A. We'll try and get to as many as possible. I'm going to turn it over now to our team and to get us started.
Great, thanks, Marty. I'll kick things off. Hi, everyone. My name is Maggi Adamek, and I am the co-founder and co-owner of Terrasoma, a boutique consulting firm that works at the intersection of food, agriculture, health, and community well-being. And we are proud to be a certified Woman Lummi Nation-owned company. We're based both in Minneapolis and in Washington State, and we have the privilege and opportunity of working all over the US and Canada, including providing technical assistance support to San Juan County as they have developed all of you have developed your food system plan. So there's 3 of us presenting today, and each of us will provide a little introduction to ourselves as we move through the presentation. I should also mention that my older son is a boat builder and lives in Port Townsend, Washington. And every summer vacation my kids spent in Washington State. I also have the privilege of working in Grace Harbor, Lewis and Mason County, as well as Wenatchee, Walla Walla Valley, and Parkland, Spanaway on other food systems issues. So my job today is to set the context, and then you'll hear from Caitlin about the process for developing the food system plan, and Lerner Limbach on the measurement and evaluation components of it. And both Caitlin and Lerner are members of the food system team, which you'll hear more about. And I'm sort of like a food system team BFF. So glad to be here, and wish I was eating that delicious fresh spinach from San Juan County instead of staring out the window where it's 14 degrees here in chilly Minnesota. So awfully glad to be here. And my job today is to provide a brief overview of a few dimensions and kind of need to knows or 411s about food system plans. Typically, a food system plan is designed to serve as a clear and comprehensive long-term blueprint for the food and agriculture system of a region, an area, a community, a neighborhood. So that can happen at different scales, and it typically features a variety of characteristics. Number one, oftentimes there's a community engagement component where members of the community, food systems leaders, people who are passionate and care about food and agriculture participate in a variety of ways to identify needs, issues, barriers, opportunities, solutions, et cetera. And that's definitely been the case in San Juan County. The other thing that food system plans typically do is include best practices and an evidence base for the solutions that they identify. In other words, the issues, barriers, opportunities, et cetera, that have been surfaced through the development process use a pretty rigorous, comprehensive research-based approach. And then the solutions that get identified are vetted to make sure that they actually work. So we try to remove the ideas that may or may not be proven, and leave in those that we know for sure are what the community wants and are best fit, and we feel confident will work for that community. Plans oftentimes include a set of goals and are typically accompanied by objectives and associated strategies that help fulfill those objectives and goals. as well as targets for change. And Lerner will talk a little bit more about those metrics later in the presentation. So I think it's really helpful to think of a food system plan as a kind of change agenda for hyperlocal, local, and regional food systems or food sheds. And oftentimes they include an emphasis on things like healthy food skills, healthy food access for all members of the community, fostering a vibrant local food culture, developing and strengthening the infrastructure that goes along with a food system, and how this effort can support the growth and resilience of a thriving local food and farm economy. And more recently, a lot of these food system plans tend also to be responsive to issues around food insecurity and climate change. So food system plans are all the rage, and Washington is no exception. Internationally, the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact facilitated more than 200 cities of all sizes across the planet to commit to developing a food system plan, in part that are responsive to climate change issues. So you're in good company all over the world, from cities as huge as Bombay to very small towns. So we're really seeing a lot of this movement internationally as well as across the US. And these plans really occur at all different geographic scales, many of which happen at the county level, just like San Juan County. And they're designed to address a variety of issues. Sometimes it's issue specific, like food insecurity. Sometimes it spans the breadth of the food system. And that's what we did here in San Juan County with this plan. You're also in really good company in Western Washington, as I'm sure many of you know. Either side of the Sound, there's a lot of communities that have developed food systems plans at various scales, including several of the communities that I'm working with on the peninsula. And Whatcom County's been a great partner and advisor to San Juan County, as they're just several months ahead of you in the development of their food system plan. The other thing I want to mention is that island communities, and San Juan County is a good example of this, are really thinking about food access, resilience, the unique isolation and assets, the type of food system and food culture, as well as food traditions and associated vulnerabilities that island communities face. So I've helped islands like Maui, the Big Island in Hawaii, and Oahu develop long-term food systems plans. And many island communities in Canada and the US are doing just what you're doing. So once the plan gets development, what goes on with its implementation? Because that's really the transition you're currently making in San Juan County. The plan has been launched and shared with the public, and you'll hear more from Caitlin about that. But so then it's time to transition into implementation. And there are several steps that are pretty typical for communities when they're at this point. The first one is folks collectively figure out what type of process or infrastructure they're going to need in order to plan for and support that implementation period. Once that process and infrastructure is developed, there's usually a prioritization process that happens, and you'll see your plan is very ambitious and comprehensive. So that means there's a lot of strategies in there. So where do you even start? What's most important? Where is there the most support? So you'll undergo some type of prioritization process in coming months that will also include the identification of specific actions you can undertake to achieve those strategies and ensure you have the champions and resources you need in order to implement those strategies. Once you get that work out of the way, you'll develop very tactical level work plans. Who's going to do what, when, how are we going to get this done? And who are the key stakeholders that are going to carry this work forward? Part of this implementation phase 2 is creating the means and systems for measuring and reporting your progress and outcomes. And then, of course, sharing that progress with others and using communications and promotion to motivate participation and incentivize people's involvement, letting them stay in the know, but also creating pathways for them to pitch in and become a part of your next chapter of your food movement in San Juan County. So that's a typical overview of how implementation works. And now I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to introduce herself and move on to the next component. Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Is my sound coming through okay? All right. So my name is Caitlin Leck, and I am the coordinator for the food system team, and I wear a couple other hats in our food system here in the islands. I am super grateful to be here today on Coast Salish territory, calling in from Orcas Island. Yeah, really excited to talk about our plan with you all and hear your questions. So before I give an overview of our process, I wanted to say our slides will be available and this is recorded. So I'm going to kind of give a high-level overview, but you'll be able to dig into the details if you'd like. So I'll put that in the chat at the end here. And before I started on the process, I wanted to give a shout out to my amazing teammates. So Lerner's going to speak after me, and then also Rebecca Moore, Kristen Rezbeck, and Faith Vandeput. So we have a stellar team, and we are incredibly grateful to Maggie and Terraselma for providing pro bono services that have been absolutely instrumental. So thank you, Maggie. Thank you, team. Next slide. Okay, so to give you a sense of our process, we created 2 slides with timeline information. So again, lots of details, but I'll just give kind of a bird's eye view. So the first timeline slide will be about how we got to our community food assessment, and the second will be about how we got to our food system plan. So back in the fall of 2019, we had an Agricultural Resources Committee meeting, a retreat. And what rose to the top as a priority was creating a food system plan. So that following winter and spring, we secured our initial funding and convened our team. And as the timing went, that's when COVID hit. And so we were actively involved in emergency food response. So we were kind of in this dual role of creating our team and clarifying our mission and vision, and also supporting our community when we had empty grocery store shelves. So that's how we started. It was wild-eyed, and we found our bearings. And we leaned heavily on the USDA toolkit, the Economics of Local Food System toolkit, to do a deep dive into secondary data that summer. That was followed up by supporting primary data collection. And that's also when we received a sub-award for the Regional Food System Partnership Grant through NABC. So the private donation and that grant have been absolutely key in us.
You're frozen.
Uh-oh, she froze. They have been key in us getting this done.
We're a little worried about this. I wonder if it would help for her to turn off her camera. Oh,
it almost always does.
Yeah. I wonder if we can actually turn it on.
Text her in case she doesn't know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you, Lerner. I just messaged her. Lerner, while we're waiting for her to unfreeze, is there anything else you would have to add to this slide, given where Caitlin froze?
She had pretty much covered that, but just to say that the process of originally we were thinking we would do the community food assessment and then the plan, and the whole thing was going to take like 2 years, and so now it's been 4 years, and so but having the grant funding as well as the private funding has been crucial, and then Maggie's pro bono service also. So it turned into a much bigger project than we initially intended, which was probably good that we didn't know that at the beginning, because we may have been intimidated to start.
And that's pretty common.
Yeah.
Should we move?
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should keep going. And so in the community food assessment, we identified strengths and current collaborations, and as well as challenges. And so this is a list of the areas requiring strategic attention, and that's a lot of sort of as we built the plan, what we focused on creating strategies for to address the issues that were identified in the community food assessment process. We can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So then as we wrapped up the community food assessment and we moved into the planning process, we were also, there was overlap, obviously. Before we finished the community food assessment, we were getting input on that. We had studies taking place, like the food system housing study, which was both addressing one of the challenges, housing, that we had been identified, and also it was giving more data to complete the assessment. So there's a lot of dovetailing of the two. We had town hall events to get additional input and on the strategies that we had identified. And we created this massive strategies spreadsheet that started out really long. I think we had 150 different strategies or something identified, plus a lot of actions. And so there was this process of having everybody review those and weigh in and wordsmith. It was this like community-wide wordsmithing. And we were able to distill that down to, we ended up with less than 100 strategies. That's still a lot. And in that process, we decided to move the actions to a future step of having action guides, which you see winter, spring 2024, which is the process that we're just undertaking now. And so we didn't want to, realizing we had 100 strategies and there's actions for every strategy. That was just a level of detail that we decided we would keep the action guides separate from the plan itself. That way they can be more fluid and we can be more responsive and make changes as we go. So I took over for you, Caitlin. So now we're on this slide.
Thank you.
Are we done with this slide, learner?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Welcome back, Caitlin.
Thank you. Sorry,
Caitlin, I would turn your camera off just to avoid freezing again.
Okay. Sorry for the rural internet woes, everybody. Okay, thank you, learner, for filling in. So we did want to note that throughout our process, there were ongoing elements and components to what we were doing. And primary among those were building connections with Coast Salish food sovereignty leaders and elders. So Maggie helped us to decipher between two approaches for relationship building. One that was continuing on the path we had been on, that was building relationships with people in different contexts, folks that were working on food sovereignty and Coast Salish nations in different work situations, kind of serendipitous connections. And then there was a more traditional protocol where we would connect with an elder and that elder would guide us and connect us to the people that we needed to speak with in a traditional manner. So our team opted for that traditional protocol approach. Maggie has been so supportive in that, and we are so grateful to her. And we are moving at the speed of trust, and we are thrilled to be working with food sovereignty leaders and elders in Coast Salish nations. So that's an incredibly important part for our team, and we'll keep you posted on those developments. We did also want to say that we have been giving presentations throughout the process, trying to keep decision makers and community members informed. So highly recommend that approach as well. And then also I've been able to connect with food system planners from neighboring counties, Whatcom Island and Skagit each month. And that's been extremely helpful. Next slide. Okay, so as I'm imagining learner mentioned, we went from the assessment, took those key findings that created the basis for the food system plan. And that plan, the strategy spreadsheet that was refined through all of these community engagement events, became the plan that we built a narrative around the strategy spreadsheet and arrived at these 5 goals. So lots of details you can check out in the plan itself, but to read the goals aloud, we arrived at these 5. So 1, scale up local food production. 2, steward land and enhance ecosystems. 3, ensure access to healthy food. 4, reduce waste. And 5, build regional connections. Next slide. So within each of those goals, we have a subset of objectives and strategies. And so in the plan, you'll find these color-coded pages. And this is an example with goal 1, the narrative describing the goal, and then a series of objectives with related strategies. And then when we get to the action guide step, which is coming up next in our process, that will become even more granular, where each strategy will have a series of action steps related. Next slide. So lastly, I just wanted to mention that we imagine this as an iterative process. So we completed our community food assessment, kind of the state of the state in our county of the local food system. Then we were strategizing, where do we want to go? And so that is our food system plan. So we were on the cusp of publishing that finalized plan. And then our subsequent step is to create action guides, as I mentioned, that granular level detail, concurrently with developing an evaluation framework. So that's our very next step. And then we'll see how we go. It will be time to assess and plan and create action guides again. So it's an iterative cycle. So to hear more about action guides, or excuse me, evaluation framework, I'll hand it over to Learner.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Maggie and Caitlin. And I'm glad you could join us again, Caitlin. So my name's Learner Limbach. I'm the general manager of the Orcas Food Co-op. which has been in business for 10 years. I was one of the founding board members and then hired as the general manager. And so as part of that, I've been engaging in food system work for a long time. I was also the chair of the Ag Resource Committee for 5 years, which was during the time we were starting to discuss doing this planning process. And I was an ARC member for 10 years in a row and just stepped off. So very excited to be getting to embark on this process and wrapping up the plan and moving into measurement and evaluation. So as we're wrapping up the planning process, the initial planning process, we're now working on developing the evaluation framework, which basically the goal is to answer the question of how do we know that the strategies and the actions, which as Caitlin mentioned, we're now creating action guides. How are we going to know if the actions are having the intended effect? Because we're here to, we're making change happen. Our plan is, we really want to create change. How do we know that, we're actually creating the changes that we want to change and that the energy that we're investing is invested in the right places? So the evaluation framework is sort of a 3-component process. We've been identifying key progress indicators as we've been doing the planning process and doing the assessment. And we have a list of those. We're now sort of organizing those and cherry picking some that we want to use on the data dashboard to communicate our progress. And the data dashboard is really to engage people, and it'll be an online portal to communicate with our stakeholders. The goal is really to make it user-friendly and accessible for people in the ag world, for decision makers, and for the general public. And also for whoever has to update the thing later. We want to make it not too cumbersome. So that's the process of like the balance of not too much data, but the right data so that we can so that it's useful. And then the ongoing evaluation is we've established baseline data, and mostly we're leaning on secondary data sources that already exist and that we know are going to be reliably available and repeated over time. So the new data needs to be, plugged in and updated, into the dashboard, and that will help our ongoing evaluation process. And we are really trying to be disciplined and only use primary data collection when it's really for a specific purpose where there's a gap that we've identified. So we can go to the next slide. So I'm going to continue on the thread of using the goal 1, scale up local food production as the example throughout what I'm explaining. But remember, there's 5 goals. So all of these elements are, times 5 kind of. So out of our list of sample progress indicators that we've put together, we're now working on organizing them into ones that we already have baseline data for and ones that we don't. And so that's part of our process of sort of pulling out what do we want to start with in the data dashboard. And, we're going to be trying to start with the ones that seem most important and also that are easy data to grab and that is going to be updated in the near future. We can go to the next slide. And this is, so even though we haven't decided all of the indicators that we're going to be using for tracking progress, we did set some ambitious goals. Our top 5 winnable goals for the food system plan. And we put those in the plan. And this is the infographic that we put together to just really illustrate. And, this is something that we thought it could be printed out. It can be shared. It's, something that communicates that really it's an ambitious plan. And we have some concrete targets that we're aiming for. And it's about a 10-year time horizon from now through 2035. And so, through that period, we want to sort of use these goals to say, okay, well, this is where we're headed. How do we get there? What actions do we need? And also try to break it up into bite-sized pieces. We need to be have made it part of the way by 2030, hopefully, towards some of these goals in order to be on track. So, okay, next slide. So here's the local food goal again, and just zooming in on that a little bit. Our goal is to increase local food sales from 5.1 million to 11.2 million by 2035. And as you'll see on the next slide, there's a lot of data that goes into this, and we essentially have created a methodology which was assisted by the Western Washington University Economic Research Center, which did the local food economic analysis with us. And they developed a multiplier tool, an economic multiplier tool for us to use as well. And so the actual data spreadsheet that we have is actually a lot more cells, a lot more numbers in it, but this is a pared down version, just to show that broken up into 5-year increments, we have projected out how we think the food system will change based on the work that we're doing, and what the effect will be of that, including how many jobs will be created in the food system and the total economic impact that will occur if we increase sales by that much. And so that can be really useful for communicating what we're doing to the county council, policymakers, economic development center, or what, people that maybe or applying for grants and things like that. So in contexts where it's useful to use economic terms or talk about jobs, we can say something like, okay, from 2025 to 2035, the new local food sales will create $8.7 million of total economic impact, resulting in 128 new food and farm related jobs. And so it can be a powerful storytelling tool. And we want to be able to create compelling stories of our vision for the future, to be able to communicate with all the different stakeholders that we're working with and funders. Let's see. I wanted to just end with the quote, "You can't manage what you can't measure." And that just kind of sums up, why the measurement evaluation is really important. If we don't know what where we're going, and what we need to do to progress towards those targets, then it's really hard to manage our actions. So that's a glimpse of our process and all of our findings. And we look forward to more discussion and hearing what your questions are.
Thank you. And so you have contact information here, and we're adding that to the Q&A sheet. And I just want to forward the first question here that's from Laura Stanton, which is the perennial and most important question about how do you define local? So when you're talking about local food, so let's hear what you did about that.
I can answer that. We define local as San Juan County, and we also recognize that we really want to support regional food system development as well, and so that's why we put in the plan that we also want to build strong regional connections. But local being defined as San Juan County is really important for us Islanders who just feel like we have this really defined geography. So.
And just one little nuance on that I'm wondering, when are you talking about just produce or also items that are produced in San Juan County, like value added products as well? And are do you have specifications about the ingredients for those? Like how does that go?
Do you want to try that, Caitlin, or?
I heard at the TILT conference, I heard someone referred to it as grown raised, caught, and made is how we think of it. And it is, I would say, self-identifying in terms of value added. People hold themselves to their own standard about like percentage of local ingredients. We don't have currently a standard that we use. But yeah, I like that little catchphrase within the islands. And then thinking, it's so important to be strengthening our ties and connections regionally. So it's kind of this dual goal. So we want to increase that percentage of local food that's produced and consumed in San Juan County, and at the same time be strengthening our regional connections. Does that answer your question, Marty?
Definitely. Thank you. And Laura, if you have further follow-up, or if anybody does, please put your questions in the Q&A part of your screen. It's down at the bottom, 2 little bubbles, and I'll see them there. I'm sorry that you can't just talk on this webinar version that we're using right now, but just please, anybody, feel free to type your questions in there. And the answers appear in the other column called answered. When there were a few questions that we had that were answered, just like, the contact information for our presenters. And I guess there was a question about where the funding for the food system planning work came from. And Maggie did.
I gave a partial
grant support.
I gave a partial answer, but I think Caitlin is poised to give a more fulsome answer.
Yes, and you talked about this, Caitlin, but why don't you just dig into that a little more here? That'd be great.
Absolutely. So when we were in that early formation stage and it coincided with COVID lockdown, and we were acutely aware of that reality as a really remote community. So I mentioned empty grocery store shelves, and it was pretty stark. And so a local family approached Learner and asked, what needs to happen in this situation where money is the barrier? And so he was like, didn't have to hesitate. He was like, food system plan. So that family got behind this effort, and they prefer to remain anonymous. I would sing their praises all day, but that's their preference. So thank you to that family. And with that private donation, we were able to leverage that as a matching fund for the Regional Food System Partnership Grant. And so that's a USDA grant. And this phase of the grant is specifically for planning. And there's a lot of people on this call who could speak to this more effectively than I could. But just to say at a high level, NABC was the applicant, and then we in San Juan County were a sub-award of that application. And it's funded things like the food system housing study and our food system planning efforts. There was like a few feasibility studies and primary data collection efforts, the agricultural summit. There's a whole number of things that have been enabled through both the private donation and the grant. So how's that for detail level?
Yeah.
You want to add anything, Learner?
And we were able to reserve a good chunk of the grant and private donation funding still, so that we had resources for the evaluation framework, the dashboard, and coordinating like the first year of implementation. So we're still funded, at least through this year, and so that's turning out to be really important.
And I'd like to add that grant also pays for these lunch and learns, so that's fun. And I just also wanted to mention for the Q&A, if anyone wants to raise their hand, if they'd prefer to ask in person, you can raise your hand and then I can allow you to talk. So that's an option as well.
That's great. It looks like Marcy had a little bit more clarification she desired on the statistics that you're keeping about local purchasing. So she asked
I can add. I can answer that question.
Okay.
So the question for everybody, the question is, um, basically, I think like we're expecting $6 million in growth that we showed. And the question I think is, where are we expecting, what foods are we expecting to fill that gap with? And the answer is that that's going to be an ongoing discussion. But with the tool that we have, the multiplier tool, we have also this comprehensive list of different sectors, and we have the ability to sort of turn up the dial on, each one, and we can sort of see different impacts in jobs, different multipliers that happen according to the different food sectors. And so, but one of our next steps now is in our action guide phase is to get more granular with it. So to say like, well, where's the greatest potential? Where's the greatest need? We identified some of that in the process, but we didn't want to get too in the weeds and sidetracked. We had to finish the plan. And so that's going to be something that we do next is, do we need, how much additional grain, livestock, things like that, fruit. So yeah, more to come on that in the next year, I think.
And I would add an analogy that's been really helpful for me is that the overarching goal of going from 3.7 to 5% local food of total food spending, that represents kind of like just turning up the volume, like a big scale turn up. And then what Learner's referring to is we have this amazing tool where we can be like adjusting the bass and the treble and being like, behind the scenes DJs, like, and also making that available, say, to producers, beginner farmer ranchers, and saying like, we have, the study was done, there's data that supports the idea that X, Y, and Z is the most promising area that you could embark upon. So we're hoping that it can be supportive on a strategic planning level and producers on the ground and decision makers. And so it's really exciting to have a tool like that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Marcy, you have a follow-up question?
Yes. And I applaud your ambitious goals. I think that's wonderful. But with one foot in reality, farmland's disappearing. And looking at San Juan County, you have a fixed amount of land. And so I look at these goals and I say, if farmland keeps disappearing, how are you going to crank out more of this with less land? And maybe San Juan County doesn't have disappearing farmland like most other places do. I'm just impressed, and I just want to know what's the magic potion that you think is going to do this.
Do you want to have a go, Learner?
Sure. Just in assessing the land that we have in agriculture in the county, most of it's being underutilized. So this actually ties into the next question too. Somebody named anonymous attendee. How do you balance a local? It says, how does production cost variance by scale, et cetera, get addressed? And I think that's one of the issues. So a lot of the ag land is being underutilized, but it's partly because the cost of production is more in the islands, so it's hard to really compete. And so that's one of the challenges that needs to get addressed. But just from a sheer land space standpoint, there's plenty of agricultural land and soil to produce the amount that we're projecting, we think. Do you have anything to add, Caitlin?
Yeah, I would add that concern is real, the farmland disappearing. Absolutely. We have really, really intense real estate pressures in the islands. We've had a big influx of folks moving here recently, and it's in the 40s, the percentage of second homes that are here as opposed to homes that are occupied year round. And we have in the state, our county is has the greatest income disparity. So there's a lot of economic factors that are pretty grave. And at the same time, we do have farmland protection and access programs that have been working really hard to address this issue. So I think that's also, you might have said this already, Learner, but when we're looking at this ambitious set of goals, there is an enormous amount of work that, we're standing on the shoulders of giants, and a lot of this is underway. And I would say that farmland protection is like top of mind. And, the ARC, our Ag Resource Committee, has been advocating for no net loss of ag land, and it's very much in the conversation. So I don't mean to downplay the seriousness of that concern. It's very, very real. And I agree with Lorna that there are ways to optimize farmland while maintaining our stewardship goals, to optimize that production.
Well, I applaud your efforts, and I hope you're successful.
A couple of other things I'd like to add as well is some of the food raised in San Juan County goes to other places, right? Mm-hmm. So it's also about capturing food that's already produced there that is being channeled into other markets. And then there's also things like fish that's already being caught. And there are people who would be happy and eager to have market channels on the islands for those products. The other part too is when we're talking about food, it's not just food raised in fields or in pastures. It also is what we talked about, those artisanal food makers. So some of this expansion of availability of local foods is also about stimulating the maker economy as well. So a few ways to think about how to grow that number that you were asking about.
Right, and value added is an excellent way to go. It's just, it needs more infrastructure. Mm-hmm. But if you can support that, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that speaks to also that, the 5 goals, just, it's not like one is more important or, goes first or something. It's like they all have to happen in tandem, because it's like, if you look at all the 5 goals and all the strategies, they're all supporting each other, sort of. Let's see, what other questions?
Well, do any of you have any more to say about this question of while balancing local versus regional, how does production cost variance by scale, et cetera, get addressed?
Well, maybe as the retailer, I know that a lot of the food that's imported to the island gets sold through commercial channels and through stores. The school, the like institutional channels, and it is hard often for local producers to compete with products that are coming in from the region and further away, just in terms of wholesale pricing, and so that's a major challenge in terms of cranking up the percentage of the food consumed in the islands that's coming from the islands. A lot of that is through those commercial channels, and so there's some talk, and we don't have a magic silver bullet, for this, but we are aware, and we're conversing about, how do we get over that barrier where there's this, the local produce is more expensive than the stuff that we're importing, and so how do you make that accessible for the consumer and for like the purchasing departments in the stores to like feel like, oh, they can choose to buy local. So we want to create some mechanisms that will, it's a lot of different things, right? It's partly like there's a component of like consumer education, but it really is like, it's also just like affordability of it. There's people that aren't going to be able to pay like, just like $4 or $4.50, for a bunch of kale. And so how do we, create mechanisms that are innovative and creative to make purchasing the local food the easy, choice for everybody. If we don't do that, then it's just sort of, I think that tension is real and it's going to stay there. But we think that there are some innovative concepts that have not yet been tried that we hope to be able to pilot.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Johnny Fishmonger's question. Can you elaborate on efforts and successes to establish fishery co-ops that you are engaging?
it's really that one is very much aspirational, but it ties in with building our relationships with the regional tribes and so I wouldn't say that we're engaging in it so much right now beyond just that being a stated desire and so.
I would just weigh in one thing, this is a long-term plan, right? Some food systems plans are 5 years in duration. Some are longer term. The one I did on Maui is a 25-year time frame. So every plan tends to be longer term. And one of the things I think is going to be really interesting because, for example, Washington State has so many counties and so many communities developing these food systems plans. There is parallel emergence of investment and targeted development goals around local and regional food systems across the state of Washington on the Sound, just wrapped around Puget Sound, whether it's the mainland or the peninsula. And we're also seeing corresponding investment by Washington State, which when I'm working in other states around the country, I always brag about. And I'm like, you guys need to start doing what Washington State is working on doing, which is really seeing the value in investing in this local and regional infrastructure. And then at the same time right now, I've been doing food systems development work for 30 years, and I've never seen the kind of resources and mindsets and programs available at the federal level either, whether it's on the food and nutrition side or it's on the ag and food economy infrastructure development side. And that goes for Indian country too, right? There's a lot of specific initiatives around food sovereignty and food systems development that's tribally specific, as well as community specific, like the support you got through, being a sub-grantee. So some of these questions around how and where are we going to develop a co-op that focuses on seafood, where and how are we going to be able to grow these farmers? Part of that will emerge, I think, as the landscape continues to change. And we're in a golden era right now with our USDA, sort of the best time ever since I've started doing this work. And we have a really critical federal election coming up in the next couple of years that may change the trajectory of that, but may not. There's a lot of good work underway and momentum and a lot of support on both sides of the aisle for much of this work. So I think this is where you're thinking locally and thinking about your own food shed and the investments and the work that needs to occur locally. But there are these other scales of support, investment, and momentum that you'll also be able to lean into. So some of these questions we don't have answers to yet, but we also know that there are opportunities at other scales that the organizing and due diligence and planning that you've done as a county will position you well to advocate for the resources you need to start to advance some of these initiatives. So it's a very exciting time and a timely time to be doing what you're doing in San Juan County.
I would add also, I would love to connect with you, Johnny. I know Lerner would too. Learn more about Cascadian Seafair. And what came to mind for me as well was when we were drafting the top 5 winnable goals, and I believe it was you, Maggie, who noticed, okay, it's taken this many years to get to 5 co-ops in the county, and we're saying we're going to get to 10 more in this many years. So how does that look? Is it a factor of like the more co-ops there are, the easier it becomes to have more co-ops? And so that is our approach, that we are looking at this to kind of change the terrain and make create conditions for co-ops to thrive. And I know, I'm friends with a number of fisher people up here, and they are interested. There's a ton of interest in cooperative development. So learning what our neighbors are doing in Southwest Washington would be incredibly helpful. And I also did want to say on the previous question about balancing local, regional, thinking of scale and different costs. It really is, this is not an answer necessarily, but just something that we have in our minds from an equity standpoint. We want to make sure that farmers have right livelihood for the work they are doing, and at the same time, have local food be accessible to everyone in our community. And so that is a tall order. And I think that's, from an ethics standpoint, that's the only way we can really proceed. If we expect farmers to remain in production, that right livelihood piece has to be present too, at the same time as addressing food access equity issues.
Yeah, that's a very tricky calculus that we're all trying to figure out. Any other questions? If you have a question, type it in the Q&A part, or raise your hand and Emily will make it possible for you to speak. And while we're just giving a second for any last questions from participants, I wanted to just see if any of you presenters have additional comments you'd like to make. And it looks like maybe Maggie does.
I think Caitlin alluded to this in the opening, and of course, the food systems partnership you have in Western Washington is just exemplifies this. One of the things we've been in dialogue about is taking a look at the neighboring communities that are putting together their own types of food systems development plans. Some are comprehensive and thoroughgoing the way San Juan County's is. Some are a shorter term time frame, but reflect key priorities of the community around food access, healthy eating, and food systems development. So what does that shared agenda at a regional scale look like for Western Washington and even for Washington as a whole? And how does that position you as an aggregate to do things like the joint funding that you've already heard about, to do things like approaching the legislature for specific initiatives, to approach your land grant university about large USDA grants for regional food shed development? Those administrative centers have now been set up. I believe Washington's part of the consortium that's headquartered at Colorado State. And they've set up those administrative entities to avail themselves of these much larger funding sources. So when we think about that kind of regional organizing and the shared priorities and possibilities there, that's going to be another thing to keep in mind as part of the implementation work.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I just wanted to tag onto that. Thank you so much, Maggie, for saying all that. I agree. Super important. And I had meant to mention in the data dashboard development as well. That's another area where we're really open to collaborating regionally too, because we think it's going to be work to maintain and keep it updated. So there's a lot of opportunity for regional collaboration, including maybe having an online portal that's shared, so we're not all just doing our own data dashboarding. A lot of the data sources are coming from places that we're all going to be referencing the same data sets. And so, yeah. I feel very fortunate. I know the team feels really fortunate to be able to be part of the RFSP, grant and, being able to utilize that, being able to come to this event and share our story. And we've been learning a lot from other people as well that have been doing this work, even, that are further along in their process. So it's the planning, the process itself has already been very collaborative, and that's something we really want to build on.
Thanks, Lerner. We had one more probing question. This was about funding sources, and Johnny's asking if there's any advice about how to approach the Kellogg Foundation.
Oh, the good old Kellogg Foundation. I am a longtime recipient of Kellogg Foundation support over the years. I haven't been for some time, but I would have to look at their most recent set of priorities. They started drilling down in their food systems portfolio to be extremely geographically targeted. So we're working in New Mexico, particularly with tribal nations, working in the Mississippi Delta region with an emphasis on African-American growers, of course, doing all the things they do in Michigan. And being a Midwesterner myself, we're always looking at Michigan and wishing we had a W.K. Kellogg Foundation to support, our homegrown food systems efforts. So my intel is not quite as fresh in terms of how many things they might be open to funding in Washington State, but I can tell you a few things I know. every April, every program officer has a big bucket of discretionary funding that they have to hurry up and spend by the end of the fiscal year, which is June 30th. So it's helpful to start the dialogue if you have a relationship with a program officer. And those discretionary grants can be relative 6 figures. They're never huge, but you can get, 150 to 175K that way to get started. My other experience is that the submission of cold proposals, even to RFPs that get issued, oftentimes don't result in much. When I live just down the street from where George Floyd was murdered, and for the first time, the Kellogg Foundation put out like a very bold, I think it was a $50 million initiative, and they went out of their way to invite an application from Minnesota because of what had happened in the Twin Cities and in Minneapolis in particular, with a focus on food systems and racial equity. So there was a lot of coordinated effort involving a lot of key partners. And despite that invitation and relationships that we already had internally there wasn't a grant provided to the Twin Cities. So I think my experience with Kellogg is it's who you know, and it helps to know a senior program officer, and it helps to have some type of relationship. It's easy to strike up an interaction with them at conferences where you can have a one-on-one conversation while you're sitting next to them, or ask them to have lunch. They sort of treat those things as pitch-free zones, but it's a way for you to get to know them and share about their work, or have a trusted intermediary provide that introduction and see if you can get a phone call or Zoom meeting with the right player. So those are a few things to know. When I was doing this work as a practitioner before I did the kind of consulting I'm doing now, the Kellogg Foundation was the primary funder of my work. And what I'm really gratified to see is all this local leadership around food systems planning, food systems development, the infrastructure. Everybody's had to hustle their own money for farm to school, for getting food hubs put together, for establishing co-ops. The game is changing at the state level, and in a lot of states, Washington is one of them, as well as at the federal level, where there's more willingness on the part of various programs and arms of the USDA to fund these kinds of things. More money is available, more programs are available. And there's much more openness on the part of the USDA to fund cooperative agreements, for example, to land grants that, where there's a pass through of a significant size to a local community working with someone in extension or on an ag faculty member, for example.
That's great, Meg.
That's a long answer, and my information's a little bit out of date, but at least that's me speaking from my own experience at any rate.
Thank you so much for that. And thanks to Lerner and Caitlin. It's been such a very rich presentation, and inspiring to just know all the good work that's going on in San Juan County. So thank you. Emily, would you please put up the schedule for our upcoming Lunch and Learns? I just want to make sure that everybody knows what's coming. And while she does that, I want to also ask you, folks who participated, if you could fill out an evaluation form that's on the registration. It's on the registration they received, right, Emily? Or on the registration page. Help.
I'm not sure that I did put in about. That's a great idea, and I should, but I can pop the link into the I guess I'll do it in the Q&A column for now and say, will you please fill out this?
Yes, it's very short, and it helps us with future funding. And what Emily has put on the screen here is the schedule of upcoming Lunch and Learns. So the next one will be about the Western Washington Food System Partnership Project Accelerator. And that's on February 9th, same time. So we hope you'll join us for that. Again, thanks so much to presenters, and thanks to those of you who attended today. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
And Emily, you want to just stop record? Because I think we're done for the day.